are always having conversations off air about the sort of things that we have in common, the challenges that we face. Sometimes we have different perspectives on them. And something we're really mindful of at the moment is the challenge that schools, teachers, kids are having with distance learning or remote learning. So we're really mindful of that at the moment. And so we're going to have a discussion about that. And for me, my perspective on it comes really from seeing people that I know who are teachers and leaders trying to organise remote learning in different contexts and seeing the level of engagement and so on. And some of the debates in the UK around whether or not we should be producing live streamed lessons all the time is, really, really fascinating. Well, my sense of it is that, there are different contexts and there's a kind of equalities issue. If you can't rely on every single child in your class being there while you're talking to your class remotely, it's just not fair to make that your normal default way of communicating your learning. Whereas if everybody has paper-based resources that they can work through, and that's absolutely universal, and I know some schools where they're posting them, they're delivering them by hand, that's what you might need to focus on, because that's the most universal thing that your children will experience. But of course, all of those things then puts pressure on families to create the environment around that. So there are real tensions. I really think you can't transfer school on an online platform. And it seems to me the most sensible thing is a blend of some sort of face-to-face teacher-led stuff to say, even the pastoral thing of saying, hi, hello, we're all in this together, and setting work up. And some of that work might be through some videos, which you can access at any time, so that kids, when there's multiple kids in the same house, can access them at their own time. And then I think you need to have sort of deadlines and a kind of list of things to have done by a certain time, so the students know kind of some sense of progress they're working through some work and have some sense of completing the work, some satisfaction. But it can't be done in this sort of totally interactive way like in a lesson, because that's just too hard to sustain and a lot of kids can't even access it at the time. So those are some of my thoughts. Some schools I know have done what I think is an amazing job through purely paper-based. And they're being hassled to do online streaming when they don't feel they need it. And that's interesting. And those are schools which are getting pretty good outcomes. So you think, well, they know what they're doing. And it's because most of their kids are not most, but a high proportion, are not in homes where they're all teed up with Wi-Fi, ready for the teacher to lead the lesson. What's your experience of it?
The first thing I would say is I think teachers in general during the lockdown have done the most amazing job with zero notice, absolutely no notice. What do we have, 3 days, something like that, to completely turn a learning world into a potentially virtual learning world. So hats off to every single educator, first of all, for actually managing to get anything out there. And then the quality of some of the stuff that I've seen has been amazing. And especially when we're kind of feeling our way through the whole system as well. And you've mentioned the thing about inequality, huge, because not every child, every home has got even food or a safe environment or a warm environment, let alone a digitally capable environment with a supportive, available adult there. So there's huge inequalities, and there's a massive, massive debate about how this is actually going to widen the disadvantage gap. We're talking about mind the gap. A lot of these best practices in online learning are actually potentially going to widen the gap. And then there's the whole thing about workload for teachers as well, because when you deliver your lessons in school, obviously you've prepared their lessons, you're going to give feedback, you're going to assess what they're doing, what they're going to be doing. But ultimately, you're all there in the same space, getting the same feedback at the same time, or you're marking it all at the same time. Teachers are getting emails constantly, feedback constantly from parents and from children, and so their workloads have just increased ridiculous amounts. And I've spoken to so many teachers who said, I am working harder working remotely than I ever did in school. So actually, in terms of workload and well-being for teachers, it's massive. And I'm sure there are ways to reduce the workload for teachers and make things more strategic and more kind of laser precise in terms of our systems, because we're still feeling our way through that. I really like the Oak National Academy materials that have come out. And I only speak from using the Year 1 and the Year 4 ones, but shout out to Miss Harris and Mr. Critchlow on there. So you have taught my children. because we kind of felt our way through stuff from school, stuff that I'd used as well in my own teaching career. And actually, what the children really wanted to see was a person. Because ultimately, great teaching is built on great relationships. You write about this yourself, Tom. Great teaching comes from great relationships. You cannot have a relationship with a computer. So all of this remote learning at the moment is reliant on the relationships that have been built up prior to this lockdown. One of my concerns is going forward, how does a child learn really, really well and really effectively from a device or a person that doesn't know them? Because we all agree that teachers are ultimately a humane profession. So we learn from humans. And then that brings me on to the idea of our youngest learners and the children who can't necessarily read yet. How do they access stuff? They can't work independently for long, long periods of time because they've not got those independent academic skills yet. They're not fluent readers, or they're not fluent mathematicians. No. And it's a real implication for actually, if they're going to learn online, what are they going to learn?
Well, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? There's a difference between sort of reviewing stuff they've done before and giving them some practice. And initially, in that first few weeks, you're thinking, well, don't teach them anything new, just get them to practice and do things they already know. But now we're thinking, you know, for some high school students, secondary students, we're talking maybe no school till the autumn, possibly. So, wow. So we can't just talk about it like it's a temporary stopgap. It's a pretty extended time. So you do need to start thinking about what sorts of things can they do. That's interesting, isn't it? So I think the fact of having a face there for older kids, I think Oliver Caviglioli, who's a bit of an expert on these things, tells me that the studies show that there's no real difference if you see the face or not. It's just information, and you can engage with a voice. And that doesn't necessarily have to be your teacher that you know. It can be just somebody you trust. So if they sound like an expert, so you can borrow videos from all sorts of places and learn from them. But it's that thing.
I watch you all the time, Tom. I watch you.
But you've got to be in a space to think, to concentrate, haven't you?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, one of the things I've noticed from having my own YouTube channel is how few people reach the end. You know, there's about a 50% drop off in the first minute. And that could be down to me, but I think it's just a natural thing. And not every kid is going to be glued to the screen. And it's so hard. Like a lot of things, it's a diet, isn't it? It's a blend of things. So you need some resources at home. You do need some interaction.
And my children are very young. And so I'm finding I'm having to facilitate what they're doing so much more because they're still reliant on an adult. And they're very independent, very capable children. But young children need a person. You know, if we could farm them all off onto a computer, we'd have done it years ago, you know, potentially.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have done, but potentially. But they learn from people. And so, yes, games and play things and interact slowly, but actually I want them to learn the wider school curriculum diet of friendships, of relationships, of interactions, of feeling part of a community. Because essentially, if you're a child on your own, you're a community of one and your laptop. That's not learning about anything.
Imagine if you had to do this forever, you'd rethink a lot of things, wouldn't you? You'd create sort of one-world line communities. So and maybe that's something down the line. In the short term, it's really about knowledge gaps and keeping kids interested and active. So hopefully, when we do get back to normal, you know, you've got a platform to build on. And one of the things I keep thinking is give everyone a target, like a sort of a sense of where you're going. So, you know, by the end of, say, this month or something, we ought to know all there is to know about dinosaurs, or you know, this book that we're reading. And so you've got a sense of purpose. Like that's what I'm trying to aim at. And even if you've done it in a very higgledy-piggledy way, you know kind of the goal. If it's just like bit by bit by bit, you think, well, what's it all for? And none of it seems to be adding up to much. And I think that's confusing. So that's one of the approaches. I mean, we could probably discuss this forever, couldn't we? A lot of it depends on technology, family backgrounds. There's so many variables. But what I think is definitely true is it's really annoying for people to pontificate about sort of absolutes, like we should all be doing it like this, and especially if they're not actually trying to deliver it themselves.
And do you know what I've done? This is, you're gonna laugh at this. The children do loads of imaginative play at home, which you can't obviously do online. You can't do imaginative, extended physical play online, which young children need to do. I've dug out all my old textbooks that I used to use. I started to go.
Yeah. Textbooks are
I
good.
knew you'd love that. I knew you would love it. But I was like, what?
Exactly.
I got, and I was like, oh, hello, old friend. Found this old textbook out.
If there's one thing this lockdown has proven, it's that textbooks should be big in schools.
You bang that drum, you bang it.
Yeah.